Well, hey everybody, this is Chris DiFurio with Keys to the Shop. Welcome to another edition of Shift Break. Today's episode is brought to you by the wonderful folks over at La Marzocco, the espresso machine that is so well loved. From 1927 till today, they have been making espresso machines by hand in Florence. La Marzocco is the choice for so many of the world's best coffee bars because they have been consistently focused on beauty, dependability, innovation, and really just serving their customers very well. With their equipment, check them out at lamarzocousa.com if you're in the market for an espresso machine for your new shop, for your second store, and beyond. And you can email them info@lamarzocousa.com to talk about getting the right machine for you. There are all sorts of different configurations and styles, from minimum technology to a lot of technological advances and ergonomic choices. La Marzocco has something that fits your coffee shop perfectly. Again, I'm a huge fan of La Marzocco and have grown up in the industry with them, and I'm so happy to recommend them to you today. Visit them again over at lamarzocousa.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Rattleware.com. Now, Rattleware has been, whether you know it or not, in the background of your coffee shop for a long time. Their small wares, pitchers, knock boxes, whisks, shot glasses, etc. They have been in the industry helping us serve customers very well. Small wares are the kind of thing that you really rely on, and you know when you have a set of good ones when you kind of forget about them because they just work. And well, I'm here to remind you about the big impact that small wares makes, and especially those that come from Rattleware.com. If you're looking for small wares for your business, that is the place that I would check first. Go visit them again at Rattleware.com. Okay, everyone. Well, today I wanted to talk to you about hiring mistakes. 3 hiring mistakes that we all make. We've all made, and it is just part of getting to know ourselves as leaders and decision makers. Oftentimes, we will abdicate our responsibility to make decisions by allowing things to simply roll into place. We call that organic growth oftentimes. It's a nice word we give to something that's maybe unintentional that happens in our business. Well, that just happened organically. And it's actually just an unintended consequence of putting things off or not having a lot of thought about a process that you actually should put some thought into. Now, when you're doing a hiring interview, when you're setting out for an interview, the first mistake that you are going to make or have the potential to make, and you can avoid, is not starting with a clear set of values. And when I say values, I mean what are the behaviors of an individual toward coworkers, toward the customer, toward the place in the community, and the product? What are the behaviors and habits of an individual who is the perfect fit for your cafe? If you just close your eyes, lean back in your chair, and think about somebody serving during a shift, what are they doing? How are they doing it? How are people made to feel as a result of interacting with this person on a regular basis? And write that down. We always start with this exercise with my clients, and it's so revolutionary because we start with this very general idea of what it is we want. We're just not nice people to serve good coffee to our community. But then we have to get very specific and put some color to it, outline it a little bit, make it stand in contrast and study it so that when you do get in front of somebody who wants a job in your cafe, you can then compare that person's history of work and the way they conduct themselves in the conversation with that standard, with the ideal. Now, are you going to get the ideal every time? No. You're not going to get the ideal. Do you want to hire the antithesis of that, the opposite of that? No, that's the whole point. If you have the value of integrity and you know that that person somehow, I don't know how they did it, but they threw themselves under the bus by talking about a compromise that they made that actually damaged the customer experience, or that was a selfishly motivated thing that they did because, I don't know, maybe they think you're just like their friend and they're just chatting about the industry. That's a red flag. That's something that for you in that moment, you say, well, that doesn't really line up with what I would want somebody to do in that situation on my coffee bar. And this is where we get into the whole thing of it's easier for us to abdicate our responsibility to make decisions because oftentimes we just want to be liked. We don't want to be hard nosed, especially when we're just starting out. It's hard to say no to somebody when you have a very vague idea of what you're looking for. And you yourself are new in the industry as it is. That's why it's important to articulate your values to such a degree that you can see somebody is a fit and or in a contrast to those values. And that's what this whole interview process is about. And by the way, that's also how you determine if somebody needs coaching or if that person might need to move on from that role and they unfortunately might need to be let go. So those values are really important, and that's probably the number one thing that I see people doing that is a big mistake on top of things like just rushing the process where even if you did have values, you're not taking enough time to consider the person. You're just trying to get through the experience, which is not the right way to approach it. You don't want to just rush the process. The second thing, the major thing I think, is when you interview somebody, you can do all the talking. This is a cardinal sin of training as well. Training is different than informing. Training is different than education, even. Training is something that's based on coaching. I'm not going to get into that right now, but a lot of cafes, they actually don't do training. They just do nice information sessions. But coaching and training actually almost never happens. And it's rare when you do see it in a cafe. And those happen to be some of the best ones. But when it comes to the interview, the impulse that makes us want to be the lecturer or the person who just does all the talking is still there. And so what we do is we assert certain values of our business. We talk a lot about the history. We say what's important to us. We raise our eyebrows and we're like, hey, you're going to have to clean a lot of toilets. And you know that this is sometimes not a glamorous job. And we just make all of these assumptions about the person, just kind of saying yes, 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 nodding to us as we talk about these things. And for us, it's kind of a false positive. Not customer, the person we're interviewing, they are just wanting a job and they don't know the degree to which you're actually referring to cleaning. And so to them, it's like, yeah, of course, I know I'm going to do some cleaning. Well, yeah, of course, I want to give good customer service. And so they're just listening to you. But all the while, what you're not doing is finding out anything about the person. You're just finding out more about what you already know you think. That's not important. You could do that on the drive over. Get it out of your system, scream into a pillow, lecture to a mirror. But then when you get to the actual interview, you need to have an actual conversation where you do a lot of listening, asking open ended questions. And yes, these questions are based on your values and somewhat of an assumption that that person has some of those values to demonstrate for you that maybe your assumption about them is correct, that they do have integrity. And at that point, you're going to learn a lot about that person, how they communicate. Do they make eye contact with you? Are they confident? Or do they have examples from their past work and experiences in just life in general? It doesn't have to be in coffee that line up with something that you can see the whole time you're thinking, does this line up with our ethos, our values? And I wouldn't be making notes in a notepad or anything like that. Be there present with them in just a really casual, one on one kind of a way so that everyone's posture is one of conversation and maybe some vulnerability. Be a person with another person, in other words, but don't do all the talking. Don't do that. It doesn't help with training and it doesn't help with hiring. The other thing that we have to think about here when it comes to hiring mistakes is not calling references. And I'm going to lump in with this requiring very specific coffee experience. But let's talk about references first. Maybe this is like four things, but references are one of those areas where we don't call them for some reason because we feel like we I don't know why we don't, because we're the best judge of character of this person. And I don't care what their former boss thinks. Maybe you have opinions about their former boss and you don't want their input about the person. Well, I'd say that's a mistake. I'd say you should at least follow up on the thing that that person put in their resume was a reference. Have at least three, maybe four references that you can call and talk to before you hire the person. I know a lot of times, had you had that conversation, I've seen this happen where that last boss would have told you they have a real problem being late. They have a real problem following through on what they said they're going to do. Or we had a lot of one-on-ones, but they never made like a lot of progress in this one area. And certain aspects of the job were just too overwhelming, but they were just the basics of the job. There's also a lot of stuff that you can learn. Also, there's a lot of stuff that you can learn that is not just, ooh, you dodged a bullet. It's more like, wow, everyone loves this person. I had some impression that they were good, but I didn't know they were this good. That happens all the time too, but you won't know that unless you call the references. So please call them, talk to them. They're just people, you know? You might make a friend, who knows? The other thing, really quickly, is touching on the idea of having to have very specific coffee experience. I'm on the fence about this a lot. I like that people might have some kind of a food industry or hospitality industry experience, but by and large, I don't really recommend anybody fast track of an experienced barista into a position that everyone goes through an onboarding process is just a bygone conclusion. And I don't skip people, right? Because this is an opportunity for them to become integrated with the whole, with this business. And I think there might be some benefit to them having coffee experience, but if you have an amazing person that has great work experience, has worked with young people, has led a team of peers, is really good at certain craft elements of the arts, and is pretty mature and lines up with your values, are you really not going to hire that person because they don't know enough about coffee or they don't have coffee experience? I mean, that'd be the worst. you know, I would say you should hire that person if that's who you're looking at right now. So just a note on that. Now, the very last thing here, I know I said three, but I just can't help myself, is you cannot fix people. When we compromise on hiring, we compromise on the entire business, the whole business. And by the way, it's not fair to your staff. It's not fair to your customers or to the person you're hiring because they could be a perfect fit at a job where they could have gone after they interviewed for you, but you snatched them up thinking, well, they're not exactly the right fit, but I'm going to fix them. I'm going to be this kind of like parental therapeutic figure that shapes and molds them into this image of what I want to see. I got news for you. You will not do that. That will not happen. People are not molded unless they want to be molded. Most people don't enter into a work environment to say, hey, I am but a soft lump of clay in your skilled hands, oh great coffee shop owner and potter. No, people come in a certain shape. And when you try to shape them into what you want, you end up breaking it. They've already been fired. Not fired, but in the kiln. They're already there. They don't come to you as this thing, right? Now, I know the analogy falls apart at a certain point, but you've got to hire people who already have developed something that aligns with, harmonizes with, adds to the things that you are currently doing or value in your business. And if you think, well, they've got great availability and there's just one thing that I was just like, but I don't know if it's a big deal. And I think it's the kind of thing that if they really got into work, they would, we'd have these meetings with them and they fix that. And I understand too, I was young once and blah, blah, blah. We keep going down that route. Guess what? You're going to get burned every time. Lucy pulls the football away from Charlie Brown every single time. Okay, so let that be just my last little point here about hiring. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't play the therapist, the fixer, the psychologist, or the whatever. Hire people based on their fit, based on your values. Let them talk, explore who they are, call their references, have a conversation. Don't compromise on these things because it's a hard decision to undo, and it really creates a lot of tension and breakage of relationships and trust and momentum in the business. And hey, if you're about being a sustainable business over time, you need to take your time in hiring and do the right thing in the process. So, more hiring episodes in the links here in the show notes for your reference if you want to dive deep into hiring. We have a lot of that content here on the show, but I appreciate you being here. Don't forget to subscribe to Keys to the Shop on YouTube at Keys to the Shop. Follow on Instagram, DM me if you're interested in any kind of consulting or coaching for you and your team. And that'll be it for me. And thank you again for joining me. And I'll see you here next week on another edition of Shift Break from Keys to the shop.